You look that rich with that skin? Something's off. Cuff her. Now. Eastwood International Airport. A black woman, handcuffed, for looking too successful. No crime. No threat. Just ego, wrapped in a badge. But the biggest mistake? They had no idea who she was. The woman they tried to intimidate was the director of the FBI. One swipe on a secure black phone, and she made a single call. Initiate Omega string 378A. Deploy federal response. And within minutes, everything changed. So let me ask you, if you were standing there, would you have looked away like the rest? And what about your state? Is justice still justice where you live? Waving hand, welcome to Mr. 7 Stories. If you're new here, drop your state in comments. Like, subscribe, and follow for real stories that shake the system. Now, let's dive into what really happened and how one silent woman brought the whole thing down. On a late March afternoon, sunlight slanted through the high glass ceiling of Terminal B at Eastwood International Airport, North Carolina. It was a crisp, cold light that stretched across the pale gray granite floor, right where Celeste Harmon's black heels had just come to a stop. Her black Cedro carry-on glided to a rest beside her leg, still carrying traces of jet fuel and rose water from the business class cabin of Flight 814 out of Geneva. Celeste, age 41, director of the FBI, had just landed after an 8-hour journey to attend the Global Cybersecurity and Counterterrorism Summit. She wasn't flanked by an entourage, no security detail, no government vehicle waiting curbside. That was her choice. She wanted to observe, like an ordinary citizen, to personally assess how the nation's security system operated at one of its main gateways. A real leader, she believed, must see with her own eyes and witness with her own presence. Celeste was dressed simply, a deep red tailored suit, classic, clean, and refined. Her hair was pinned in a low bun, makeup minimal, a ruby leather purse with no visible logo on her shoulder. She looked more like a successful business executive than the head of one of the most powerful oversight agencies in the United States. And perhaps precisely that, is what made her a target. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can we see some ID?" A man's voice, loud with performative authority. Celeste turned. 2 airport security officers stood in front of her, one with a high and tight blonde haircut and a face like carved steel, the other younger, visibly uneasy. Colton Maddox, 42 years old, hand just off his belt, sized her up. Expensive suit, designer bag, traveling alone. Bit unusual, wouldn't you say? Celeste raised an eyebrow. No reaction. "I cleared customs already. Is there a problem, officer?" "Random check," Maddox replied, though his eyes drifted deliberately across her carry-on, her purse, and then landed on her skin color. "You look unusually successful." The other officer, Brennan Cade, 39, fumbled to follow his lead. She might be carrying something. Celeste calmly presented her North Carolina driver's license. It was valid ID, but didn't list her federal position. She answered their questions without hesitation. Point of origin, reason for travel, what she was bringing in. But the more she complied, the more Maddox's tone turned combative. "What do you do to make that kind of money?" he asked, sneering. "You say you're a regular citizen. I don't buy it." Then suddenly, Maddox snapped, "Kate, cuff her." "You can't do that." Celeste froze, voice sharp now. "I've shown valid identification. You have no lawful reason to detain me. Your attitude is the reason. That's suspicious enough." The sharp click of handcuffs sliced through the terminal air. A few passengers turned their heads, then quickly looked away as if nothing had happened. Under the sterile white light cascading from the ceiling above, a poised, powerful black woman was being handcuffed unlawfully. Not for what she had done, but for who she was. The wrong skin, the wrong class, in the wrong place. And in that moment, Celeste Harmon was no longer just a victim. She was a living witness to what America still lacked the courage to confront. That power, when placed in the wrong hands, could become a weapon, whether at an airport, on the street, or in a courtroom. But what Colton Maddox and Brennan Cade didn't know was that the woman they had just detained was anything but ordinary, and the storm that was coming wouldn't rise from anger. It would come from justice. Cold, precise, and unstoppable. The steel cuffs bit lightly into Celeste Harmon's wrist. Even after nearly 2 decades of emotional discipline in the field, she couldn't stop her pulse from quickening. Not out of fear, but out of shame for what was unfolding. Shame for a country that still let this happen. Across from her, Colton R. Maddox stood with arms folded, like a man guarding a known criminal. A smirk tugged at his lips, half amusement, half contempt. His eyes no longer assessed. They insulted. You know, Maddox said slowly, voice dripping with sarcasm. People like you, dress sharp, leather bag, flying international, usually hiding something. Celeste didn't flinch. Her eyes held steady. But inside, each word cut like a blade. Not because she was weak, but because she had once believed this kind of thing didn't happen anymore. Not here. Not in the 21st century. Not at the nation's front gate. Behind Maddox, Brennan Cade shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't routine for him. His right hand hovered close to his radio, but his eyes scanned the terminal, not for threats, but for reactions. No one lingered. No one intervened. And that silent complicity, was the most dangerous kind of betrayal. What do you do for money? Maddox continued. Money laundering? Drugs? Weapons? Offshore accounts from Switzerland. He sneered. I can spot trouble from a mile away. Celeste clenched her jaw slightly. She knew that phrase well. I can spot it. It was never about intuition. It was racial profiling dressed up as instinct. What you're saying, Celeste replied, her tone flat and cold, says nothing about me, but says a lot about you. Maddox laughed. That's the educated response, right there. Real classy. But I'm afraid degrees won't help you here. He stepped closer, so close she could smell the sour tinge of nicotine on his breath. Listen carefully, he said, voice tightening. I could take you to the station right now. Hold you for days. We'd search everything. Your phone, your purse, your suitcase. Call someone. Lawyer up. You'll miss every meeting, every flight, everything you're chasing out there. Celeste remained still. Her eyes flicked, barely, to the security camera overhead. A subtle move, but enough. She mentally logged everything. Badge number 2187. The tilt of Maddox's smirk. His exact phrasing. The layout of passengers. And the way Cade kept glancing toward gate D3, as if looking for an exit. Or Maddox leaned back, folding his arms, lowering his voice like a man striking a deal. You can make this easy. No paperwork. No detainment. You go your way. I go mine. Hell, all three of us could walk away clean. Celeste said nothing, but her eyes turned cold, like Appalachian ice, untouched by sun or sentiment. Cade swallowed hard. He could feel it now. This had gone too far. What exactly are you suggesting? Celeste asked, her voice light as wind skimming water. But beneath it, the current was rising. Maddox squinted. A gesture of goodwill. A small amount. Call it a no-trouble fee. You seem like someone who knows how to make trouble disappear. Celeste held her gaze steady. Unflinching. Maddox thought she was scared. But what he didn't know was that he had just made a mistake he couldn't walk back. Celeste Harmon's expression didn't change, even as Colton Maddox leaned forward, as if he were sharing some secret from the underworld. But this wasn't the mafia. This was Eastwood International Airport, a strategic U.S. gateway, and the woman in front of him was the director of one of the most classified federal agencies in the country. He just didn't know it yet. You see, Maddox drawled, his words thick with nicotine and backroom arrogance. I'm not a rigid guy. We got flexibility here at the airport. We can skip a few formalities. If you can be flexible too. Kate glanced sideways, clearly uncomfortable, but Maddox kept going, like some sleazy host emceeing a rigged negotiation. No need to dig through your luggage. No need for detainment. No paperwork. You don't want your name tied to anything, right? Celeste remained silent. Her breathing was calm, measured, like waves brushing a shoreline, unmoved by the performance in front of her. Maddox mistook that silence for fear. He thought she was close to caving. All we're talking, he added now, almost whispering, is $1,000. Cash. Right here. We uncuff you, say a few polite apologies, and you walk away, like nothing ever happened. Cade grimaced. He said nothing, but his right hand curled closer to his belt, as if gripping something invisible. Because he knew, if this got exposed, they weren't dealing with airport procedure anymore. This was federal crime territory. We call it a silence fee, Maddox smirked. I'm sure you've seen it before. Celeste tilted her head just slightly. You think I'm afraid of you? She asked. Voice flat as steel. Maddox paused. That wasn't the reply he expected. In his mind, Celeste was just another high-class black woman. Sharp maybe, but ultimately pliable. When faced with a little badge-wielded pressure, especially in an airport, where everyone fears being searched. Held. Delayed. Not fear, Maddox said, narrowing his eyes. I call it being smart. Celeste stared straight into him, eyes steady, unblinking, as if measuring the depth of a bottomless pit. And if I don't pay? She asked. Maddox gave a thin, cruel grin. Then you come with us. We check every inch of your bags. We verify your ID for hours. Maybe a local outlet runs a story. Unidentified woman suspected of trafficking. He shrugged. No one needs the truth. Celeste dipped her head slightly. $1,000. And I walk away. Exactly, Maddox said. No file. No noise. You get back to your big deal meeting. Or your fancy spa retreat. Whatever it is. His voice dripped with resentment. A blend of contempt and envy. The twin toxins of small men. Faced with a black woman they think has risen too far. Cade stood to the side now, unable to hide his growing anxiety. His eyes darted everywhere. Passers-by, security cameras, and the phone in his own pocket. He wasn't stupid. He knew, if anyone happened to record this moment, he'd never wear a patrol badge again. Celeste bent down slightly, calm and deliberate. My bag's over there. Left side zipper. My wallet's inside. Maddox nodded toward Cade. Grab it. Fast. But when Cade reached into Celeste's handbag, he didn't find a wallet. What flashed back at him was something else entirely. Not cash, not papers, but a matte black phone, sleek and unmarked. A device used exclusively by federal directors, secured by the Flux Sentinel Drive encryption system. A national-level encoded comms device. Celeste's eyes didn't blink. Now, she said, her voice flat and final. I'm calling my deputy director. And just like that, Colton Maddox's world began to collapse, 1 inch at a time. Brennan Cade, hands trembling slightly, pulled the device from Celeste Harmon's bag. The screen lit up. No app icons, no carrier name. Just one glowing phrase. Vanta Presence, access tier, Sigma 1. He looked over at Maddox, unsure. It doesn't look like a normal phone. Just give it to her, Maddox snapped, waving him off. She's probably calling for backup. Makes her look guiltier. Celeste took the phone. Her wrists were still cuffed, but her index finger traced a deliberate pattern on the glass. A 3-point crescent swipe. Then she raised it to her lips. Her voice came sharp and steady, every syllable a bullet in the chamber. Marcus, this is Celeste. I'm at Eastwood Airport, Terminal B, Exit 7. Cade flinched. Marcus? No, he'd heard that name before. Marcus Ellington, Deputy Director of Strategic Federal Response. Celeste glanced at both men, now completely frozen. I'm being illegally detained by 2 local officers. Names, Colton Maddox, Badge 2187. Brennan Cade, Badge 3196. They've attempted extortion and unlawful restraint. This is a Tier 1 security breach. Request immediate response from Pinehurst Federal HQ. Initiate Omega String 378A. Maddox took a step back. He'd never heard that phrase. Not in any training, not in any briefing. Confirm relay to Commander Gideon Trask. Protocol, Vanta Presence. Priority level, maximum. From the other end, a single reply. Calm, male, and heavy with command. Confirmed. Team will arrive in 8 minutes. Internal surveillance now active. Ensure absolute safety. Stand by for further instruction. Celeste lowered the phone, handing it back to Cade with a stare that burned through ice. And in that instant, the air changed. Flight announcements still rang overhead. Luggage wheels still echoed on tile. But in the center of that terminal, Colton Maddox, The same man who mocked her just 3 minutes earlier stood frozen, his hands trembling, like someone hit with a bucket of Arctic water. Cade's face went pale. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Who are you really?" Celeste stood tall, her wrists still bound in cuffs. Light from the domed ceiling cast a fiery glow across her crimson suit, like flames cutting through ice. "My name is Celeste Harmon," she said, unhurried. "Director of the Office of Federal Oversight and Ethics. I'm the one who wrote the laws you just trampled on." Both officers stood frozen, as if the blood had been drained from their bodies. But then, something neither of them expected happened. Roughly 25 feet away, a young black man named Zaire Coleman had been live-streaming the entire encounter, directly to social media. Not in secret, not from behind cover. His phone camera was aimed right at Celeste and the two officers. He had started recording the moment he saw them cuff her, and the entire conversation about the $1,000. Captured. In full, Zaire stepped forward a few paces, his hand pointing directly at Maddox. "I don't know who she is, but he'll better start praying, because I guarantee the whole country's going to see this." In 5 minutes flat, Maddox burst out, half yelling, half pleading. "Turn that off. This is a restricted filming area." "No," Celeste cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. "He's doing exactly what needs to be done, and you're about to face real consequences." Right then, a new sound rolled through the corridor. Heavy leather shoes, moving in perfect rhythm. Low, measured, inescapable, like the drumbeat of justice approaching. Each step echoed against the polished granite floor, each one landing like a gavel on the backs of two petrified officers. Terminal B, usually filled with flight calls, rolling luggage, and toddlers crying, was suddenly still. From the far end of the terminal, 6 figures moved swiftly. Plain clothes, matching black jackets, no logos, sunglasses on, comms in their collars, lead-lined nylon document bags strapped across their shoulders. They didn't need to shout federal agents. Their presence alone parted the crowd, like floodwaters snapping against a levee. At the front was a tall, graying man with a precision haircut, broad frame, and the kind of face that didn't tolerate hesitation. Gideon Trask, lead commander of the Pinehurst Federal Office, a name well known across law enforcement in North Carolina, and feared by many. He walked straight towards Celeste Harmon, ignoring Maddox and Cade completely, as if they were malfunctioning mannequins in a training exercise. "Director Harmon," Trask said, his voice ringing like thunder rolling over the Blue Ridge Mountains. "Are you all right?" Celeste gave a slight nod, her hands still cuffed in front of her. "No physical injuries, but there are 2 serious crimes happening right in front of you." Trask turned, just a glance, and Maddox instinctively stepped back like someone dodging an oncoming train. "Agent Holloway," Trask commanded, "release the director." A female agent stepped forward, pulled a coded key from her inner pocket, and with one clean click, the cuffs popped open, like unlocking a limousine. Celeste rubbed her reddened wrists, but her gaze never wavered. By now, Brennan Cade was visibly shaking. Colton Maddox looked frozen, his eyes wide, lips pressed together, face drained of all color. He stammered, "Wait, I didn't know. I thought she was just..." "Just what?" Trask cut in, stepping in so close their faces nearly touched. "A well-dressed black woman? An intelligent woman who made you feel small? Or just a citizen, with the right not to be threatened or extorted by someone who wears a badge?" Maddox said nothing, could say nothing. "Agent Quinn," Trask continued, "disarmed both officers. Removed their firearms, badges, radios, everything." Cade opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came out. 2 federal agents moved in from either side, swift and wordless. One held Maddox's elbow while the other pulled his Glock from its holster. His badge came off next. His shoulder radio was unclipped. Handcuffs, taser, rescue knife, all placed neatly into an evidence pouch. Maddox stood like a man sleepwalking through his own undoing. Another agent approached Celeste, voice calm but crisp. "Director, requesting your orders for the scene." Celeste turned to Trask. "I want this area sealed off. No one in or out except federal personnel. Pull all security footage from the last 30 minutes, video and audio. She glanced at Cade and Maddox. Secure their personal devices. Check if either body cam was active. And above all, her voice hardened like steel. Preserve every second of that extortion attempt. Zaire Coleman, still holding his phone, stood frozen. One agent started toward him, but Celeste held up a hand. No, he's a witness. I want every second of his footage preserved and his civil rights protected. Zaire's eyes widened. I just recorded because it felt wrong. I had no idea you were. Celeste offered a faint smile, her first since the ordeal began. You did the right thing, and that's what gives justice a place to stand. Trask now turned to the two officers, no longer wearing badges, no longer holding rank. You are both being detained under direct authority of the federal director. From this moment forward, anything you say may be documented and used in a court of law. And when the agent placed a firm hand on Maddox's shoulder, he flinched, like a man waking from a nightmare, only to realize it was real. At exactly 2:46 p.m. inside Terminal B, Officers Colton Maddox and Brennan Cade officially lost the one thing they once wore with pride every shift, the badge of the Eastwood County Police Department. Immediately after being disarmed, they were escorted out of the public terminal via an internal corridor, one that led straight to the FBI's emergency liaison office inside the airport. Two federal agents followed close behind, their eyes locked on the spot where each badge had been, once labeled Protect and Serve. Back at FBI headquarters in Pinehurst, North Carolina, news of the incident had already reached several key players in the federal system, and one of the first to be activated was Sheridan Pike, a 41-year-old federal prosecutor known across the Eastern District as the Bloodless Blade. Within 2 hours of receiving the emergency brief, Pike had assembled a special task force and launched a full federal investigation on two fronts: violation of civil rights under color of law and conspiracy to extort under the Federal Hobbs Act, a charge of extreme gravity, especially when committed in a federal transit hub like an international airport. Pike didn't work alone. He coordinated directly with Agent Gideon Trask, who had been on the scene, to begin compiling all evidence: airport surveillance footage, police radio recordings, and most critically, the body cam data from Brennan Cade. Inside a data review lab at Pinehurst HQ, a tech agent made a startling discovery. Cade's body cam had never been turned off. It had recorded everything, from the moment Celeste was stopped to the exact second. Maddox said, "Just $1,000. For someone like you, that's pocket change." Pike, watching the footage, said nothing at first. But when Maddox's voice echoed from the screen, he folded his hands on the table, glanced at Trask, and gave a subtle nod. "We have enough to prosecute," Pike said. "And this time, there will be no cover-up, no apology letter to bury the truth." Meanwhile, the Eastwood County Police Department was thrown into immediate crisis mode. Media outlets had begun reporting on the most high-profile mistaken arrest in airport history. And once Celeste Harmon's true identity became public, the department's spokesperson rushed to organize an emergency press conference. But before the first line of their pre-written statement could be read, they received an official notice from the FBI. Both Maddox and Cade had been placed on indefinite suspension, with expedited termination proceedings already underway. No internal review, no lengthy administrative process. The matter had been escalated directly to federal authority. In a social media video that quickly went viral, Zaire Coleman, the young man who live-streamed the entire incident, looked into the camera and said, "I've never seen justice move that fast." That woman didn't yell. She didn't beg. She just spoke the truth. And the whole system had to stand at attention. By late afternoon that same day, Celeste Harmon returned to Pinehurst HQ in an unmarked vehicle, escorted by no one but the dignity and honor she had just defended. But she knew the fight had only just begun. 3 days after the Eastwood Airport incident, the 14th floor of Pinehurst Federal HQ was more active than usual. Conference room E12 typically reserved for high-level internal reviews, had become a nerve center for a case now shaking the entire law enforcement network. On the main display screen, technical agent Lyra Minda was scrubbing through the body cam footage from Brennan Cade. She typed in a command and queued the video to 2:07 p.m. The exact second Celeste Harmon was stopped. The image sharpened, Maddox approaching, requesting ID, then slowly shifting into words dripping with bias. You're traveling alone? Dressed like that, and not up to something? I don't buy it. $1,000. Come on, someone as fine and classy as you. You're not going to miss it. Every word, every glance, every gesture, captured. Not a second missed. At the head of the table sat Sheridan Pike, eyes fixed on the screen. Beside him, Director Celeste Harmon sat silent, hands folded. She didn't flinch, didn't react. This footage was only a mechanical confirmation of what she had already endured. This time, recorded. Undeniable. This is enough to crush any defense, Pike said, tension cutting through his voice. We have crystal clear audio, verbal threats, an extortion attempt on record. Lyra added, surveillance footage from 2 airport cameras also backs it up. One from above, one from the waiting area. Both confirm time, location, and behavior. Trask nodded. And the live stream from that young man, Zaire Coleman, matches down to the second. Pike tapped the case file. I'll anchor all 3 sources in the indictment. Midway through the meeting, something unexpected happened. A coordinator entered the room and handed Pike a red-sealed envelope. Stamped clearly, classified material, urgent dispatch from the DOJ Office of Ethics. Pike opened it, his expression darkening as he skimmed the header. After a brief silence, he turned to Trask and Celeste. We just received an internal federal discipline file on Colton Maddox. Turns out he was investigated previously for 3 race-related abuse of authority cases. From 2019 to 2022, Celeste asked slowly, and why was he still on duty? Because all 3 were. Settled off the record, Pike replied. Lack of evidence. No witnesses willing to testify. And according to the file, 1 federal investigator resigned after receiving threats from someone inside. The room turned cold. Celeste exhaled softly. So, this isn't just an extortion case. It's the tip of an iceberg. Pike nodded, his voice heavy. And this time, thanks to a body cam, social media, and your silence in the face of humiliation. We have the whole iceberg. Back at Eastwood Airport that afternoon, a team of FBI technicians was reinstalling the secure data storage system for the first time in nearly a decade. Every hallway camera, every exit scanner, even the ID readers were now linked to the Flux Sentinel Drive monitoring system, not just to detect crime, but to prevent officers from becoming the criminals themselves. Meanwhile, at the Clearhaven Federal Holding Facility, Brennan Cade sat in custody. His attorney had just informed him. He was the only one who could still take another path if he chose to cooperate truthfully with the government. And deep inside, for the first time in his many years as a police officer, Cade realized truth might be the only thing that could save him. Inside the gray concrete cell, harsh fluorescent light bounced off the cold metal bench where 39-year-old Brennan Cade sat hunched over. His eyes were fixed on his clasped hands, as if searching for answers in the faded calluses left by years of patrol. Across from him sat Sheridan Pike, the federal prosecutor, a brown leather briefcase between them, a silent line he would have to cross. Seated beside Pike was Cade's court-appointed attorney, small in stature, but with eyes locked on every flicker of his client's expression. You still have a chance to avoid the maximum sentence, Pike said, each word hitting the air like nails driven into a wall. But that door only opens if you decide to tell the truth, the full truth, about what Colton Maddox did and what you did. Cade looked up. His eyes were sunken from sleepless nights, haunted. I didn't think it would go this far, he whispered. Back then, I thought he just wanted to scare someone. I didn't know she was the FBI director. No one expected you to, Pike replied. We just want to know, has Maddox done this before? And have you stayed silent? Silence hung for several long seconds. Then Cade exhaled, leaning back. His gaze fell. He's done it before. But the victim didn't have proof. A Dominican woman barely spoke English. And I didn't step in. I was afraid they'd transfer me. Afraid of being labeled a traitor to the unit. Pike didn't judge him. He just held Cade's eyes. Then are you ready now to tell the entire truth before a federal grand jury? Cade nodded, this time more firmly. 3 weeks later, the first hearing at the Eastwood County Courthouse began. Reporters crowded the hallways. Local news vans parked outside the main gates. Some protesters held signs that read, "No badge stands above the law." In Courtroom 3B, Celeste Harmon sat in the front row, not as a figure of authority, but as a citizen there to witness justice done the right way. Beside her were Trask and Lyra Minda, the evidence analyst, along with several senior members of the FBI. Sheridan Pike stepped to the stand and called his first witness, Brennan Cade. No badge, no uniform, just a pale blue shirt, a hollow face, and a determined walk. His voice was low. The first sentence trembled. "I'm here to tell the truth and to take responsibility." Pike nodded. "Do you acknowledge your role in the attempted extortion?" "Yes," Cade replied. "I didn't make the demand, but I stood there. I didn't stop it. And I handcuffed an innocent citizen with no cause, only baseless suspicion." Pike pressed deeper. "Who made the offer to take money?" "Colton Maddox," Cade replied. "He's done it before, more than once. I witnessed it, and I did nothing." The steady clack of the court stenographer's keyboard filled the silence. A few people in the courtroom exhaled quietly. As for Maddox, seated beside his defense attorney, he was frozen, gripping the sides of his chair so tightly that his knuckles had turned bone white. Cade ended his testimony with a sentence that made the entire courtroom fall still. "For the first time in my career, I understood something. Standing beside the wrongdoer is still a crime, and I accept the consequences for my silence." That same day, outside the courthouse, Zaire Coleman live-streamed to thousands of viewers. Today, a man who once wore the badge stood up and owned his wrong. Not because he was caught, but because he finally chose what was right. By the fourth week of the trial, United States versus Colton Maddox and Brennan Cade at the Eastwood County Courthouse, the air in Courtroom 3B had grown heavy, thick like early morning fog across the Blue Ridge. Not a single public seat remained. The press packed in daily. Broadcast vans camped outside, cameras pointed at the doors. But inside, every eye was fixed on one witness walking slowly to the stand, Celeste Harmon. She wore a charcoal gray suit with a crisp, round-collared white blouse. No badge, no honor ribbon, no symbol of power. Only her eyes sharp, and her voice forged like steel through flame. Prosecutor Sheridan Pike approached gently. "Director Harmon, could you describe, in your own words, what happened that day at Eastwood Airport?" Celeste nodded. "No notes, just memory." Her voice steady, low, and clear. "I was stopped without cause, illegally handcuffed, mocked for my clothes, my skin color, my success, and then I was told to hand over $1,000 if I wanted to walk away." She paused, her gaze locking on Colton Maddox. He looked down, his shoulders clenched, drowning in a shame he could no longer hide. "I didn't say anything in that moment, not because I was weak, but because I knew silence can dismantle more than anger ever could. I let them speak. I let them fall. And then I called the deputy director. A few jurors gave small, almost imperceptible nods. They had seen the footage. They had heard the body cam recordings. But hearing it from this woman, the victim, the director, the one who didn't need to shout to make the system tremble, they felt something no device could capture. Dignity, when violated, does not need to scream to be heard. Maddox's lawyer tried to push back. "Would you agree that my client didn't know who you were?" "Absolutely," Celeste replied. "He didn't know I was a director, but he also didn't know I was a human being, deserving of respect. And that is the bigger problem." Her answer froze the courtroom, like time itself had held its breath. 3 days later, the jury returned with a verdict. "We find the defendant, Colton Maddox, guilty of violating civil rights under color of law and conspiracy to extort under the Hobbs Act. We find the defendant, Brennan Cade, also guilty with mitigating circumstances due to full cooperation. Colton Maddox collapsed into his seat, hands clawing at the edge of the table. A man who once wore the uniform with pride now faced 12 years in federal prison at Ashwood. No parole, no early release. As for Cade, the man who once chose silence, he was sentenced to 8 years, with a possibility of reduced time if he continued to cooperate and demonstrate genuine reform. When the trial ended, Celeste stepped out of the courthouse into a crowd of hundreds. A reporter called out, "Director Harmon, do you have a message for those still wearing the badge, those torn between protecting and looking away?" She stopped, looked straight into the camera. "Rank doesn't protect you from consequences. Only ethics do. If you witness wrong and say nothing, you're part of the wrong. But if you stand up, even when it costs you, that's when your badge actually means something." Applause broke out, not for victory, but because the truth had been spoken, out loud, before the nation. 1 month after the historic trial, the atmosphere at FBI headquarters remained tight, not from crisis, but from purpose. A fire had been lit at Eastwood Airport. Now it was spreading into every conference room, every training module, every internal audit across the country. In the top floor office, Celeste Harmon, the 41-year-old director of the FBI, sat facing a tall window overlooking Washington, D.C. In the distance stood the Washington Monument, silent and resolute, a symbol of the very ideals she'd sworn to protect. She had just finished an interagency meeting with the Department of Justice and Homeland Security. On the table before her lay a bold new initiative. Operation Watchtower, oversight of power, protection of the people. It wasn't just about upgrading cameras or rewriting complaint procedures. This program called for a nationwide retraining in ethical conduct, mandatory for every law enforcement officer, from local precincts to federal bureaus. At the heart of it, a new course titled Practicing Power with Responsibility, a reform she personally authored, inspired by the Maddox case. But there was something in her eyes that day, not triumph, but depth, the kind that only comes from knowing. The real victory wasn't the verdict. It was ensuring the country wouldn't forget what happened. She remembered the look on Maddox's face as the sentence was read, not out of hatred, but because of the emptiness. A man who once wore the badge, who was entrusted with power, and forgot that power exists not to dominate, but to protect. She also remembered Cade, the one who finally stood up. Too late, maybe, but sincerely. His honesty proved what Celeste had always believed. Everyone has a chance to make it right, if they have the courage to face the truth. Celeste never sought applause. She didn't post anything on social media, didn't grant a single TV interview. She spoke only once, at the FBI's annual leadership conference, in front of more than 500 state and federal commanders. "We don't need more laws to stop bad people. We need more light to keep good people from stepping into the dark." That quote was shared thousands of times across law enforcement forums. It wasn't a slogan. It was a reminder and a promise. Around the same time, at the Eastwood Training Center, a new class of cadets sat watching the body cam footage for Brennan Cade. But they weren't just being taught how to avoid mistakes. They were learning why ethical duty is the only foundation strong enough to hold the weight of public trust. One trainee, a 23-year-old Asian American woman, raised her hand. "Sir, who was the woman in the video? The one who stayed silent till the very end?" The instructor smiled. She didn't just stay silent. She stood on principle. Her name is Celeste Harmon. That evening, as Celeste stepped outside her office, a soft rain began to fall. But she didn't rush for cover. She paused beneath the overhang, let the cool drops touch her forehead one by one. Because sometimes, to cleanse a broken system, you don't need to shout. You just need to stand still, look in the eye, and never look away. She smiled faintly, then turned and walked back to the work. For Celeste Harmon, justice was never a destination. It was a journey, one that begins with the right silence and endures through the refusal to stay silent when it matters most. I hope you felt the strength of this story. If you believe its message deserves to be heard, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss what's next. In the meantime, I've handpicked two more powerful stories for you, each one built on truth, dignity, and the kind of justice that never backs down. Have a meaningful, inspired day.